Welcome to our OnePlan webinar series. This is number 2. If you missed the first one, it's worth going and have a look. It was produced and hosted by David Supika. So it's really interesting, interesting watch. This one is on event safety and security. It's my first one, so as you've already seen, I've had a few production difficulties. So please be patient. Please let us know if you can have any problems with the hearing or the visuals. I guess the idea behind this webinar series is to try and add a little bit of narrative behind the tools that we've created in OnePlan. A little bit of the kind of when you use the tools, how you use the tools, why you use the tools. So I guess hopefully with each one of these subjects, you'll be able to sort of go back and use our platform with a little bit more knowledge. What I'm going to do is, well, first I apologise. I should introduce myself. My name is James Cook. I've been with OnePlan for a while now. I started out in events back many moons ago in the Sydney Olympics in 2000. Since then, I've been very lucky to been able to work on both small and large events. Working on some of the big World Cups, the football World Cups and crickets and basketball and multi-sport events like the Olympics and the Commonwealth Games and the Pan American Games. So and also in lots of different countries around the world. So I've been really lucky with that. So hopefully I've got a good sort of wide range of experience and can bring some context to some of our event planning tools. What I'm going to do to that today, and probably for the future webinars, is sort of as a basic format. We're going to have a special guest join us, and the special guest with lots of amazing guests lined up who have lots of experience. And we're going to talk about some ideas behind each topic. Generally talk in a sort of holistic fashion about some key ideas and key learnings with regards to that topic. In today's case, it's event safety and security. And then I guess what I'm going to do after that is take you into the platform and show you some of our tools, so more of a sort of practical hands-on about how you can use our tools in OnePlan. And then finally, we'll open it up to questions at the end of the day, and hopefully we can work out how to do that. But without further ado, I'm going to introduce our special guest for today. His name is Gabriel Bear, and excuse me while I quickly just flip to his LinkedIn, because I need to correctly describe his incredible amount of experience. But he has worked in a number of major events. Let's go through some of them. He's an International Olympic Committee advisor, a National Olympic Committee senior manager, worked in Japan Olympics, sport manager, director of sports and venues. The list goes on and on. We've worked together on a number of events together ourselves, and it's a real pleasure to have him with us today. What I've done is I had to pre-record the interview with Gabriel, only because he's a little bit of a different time zone, so I wanted to be able to capture that. So now I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to share the pre-recorded video. Hi guys, thanks so much for joining us today. We've got our special guest, Gabriel Behr Andrade, who's joining us from Sao Paulo, or the interior of Sao Paulo. Looks like a beautiful background you got there, Gabe.
Yeah, luckily it's the interior of Sao Paulo, about like 3 hours out of Sao Paulo, so not a big city at all. Very small place here in Brazil.
It looks lovely anyway. It looks really lovely. Thank you so much for your time, mate. Much appreciated. Look, we've got a big topic today: event security and safety 101. I kind of get the feeling that you and I could probably do a whole season on this topic. So I guess we're going to try and keep it short and concise and get some key messaging out for our users on some sort of strategies of dealing with safety and security for events. what I've come up with is a sort of a little bit of a fun way, a bit sort of Jeopardy style sort of game show. I've put down some different topics for us to discuss today, which I'll share my screen right now. Let me know when you can see that. Okay, can you see that okay?
Yep.
Yeah.
You've got a nice wide array of topics.
Yeah, so I thought we'd have a bit of fun today, because at the end of the day, we're going to try and sort of cover off on some key topics. We won't be able to cover off on everything, so the idea was just to sort of like pick a topic or topics if you want. Tell a little bit of story from your wonderful background and all your experience, and then try and have a message at the end in terms of I guess sort of a lesson to take away for our users on the best things for security and safety. So our players today are, of course, myself and Gabe Bear, and let's give you the first turn. Which pick of the board would you like today, Gabe?
I think let's start off with working with multiple jurisdictions. We might end up getting into a bit of culture while we're in there as well, but I think that's I think the big thing when we start talking about security in particular. But I think one thing before I even start going into that is I really want to make a distinction between security and safety, which I think is quite important. People mix them together.
Yeah.
But the way I see it in a really simple term, that security is protecting people from other people, and safety is protecting people from things and sometimes themselves. So this is, I think, the thing that first we need to kind of distinguish when we start talking about safety and security.
Sure.
So when we're talking about multiple jurisdictions, I think in relation to security especially, it's which groups are going to be involved in security here, because you can have various different types. You can have, if you're just hiring private security, if you're engaging with the police, if you might have even the army, you might have the venue already has their own security. I worked with an event, and we had 4 different levels of jurisdiction. So we had the army, which had the broader outside of the venue, basically from the parking lot out. Then we had the police, which was working on the entries of the venue. We had private security inside the venue, and then we had the own venue security, the people that always did the security there, and they were manning the control center. So it was really important for us to get the communication right and everybody talking to everybody. And the key thing here, when you have people from different jurisdictions, is to have a briefing in the morning, so we all know what we're going to do. Okay, this is the plan for today. So we all know that today's quarterfinals, and there's a big match going on from the local team or something like that. So you can communicate what's going to happen with that, and also a debrief in the evening, especially if you have multiple days of events. You debrief, this worked, this didn't work, we had an incident here, we had an incident there, or what's happening. So the key thing of working with multiple jurisdictions is this communication. Now, I'm going to go into the culture part of it. I hope you don't mind me jumping into another one, because it's very important, because there is a culture in each one of these groups. So the army has their own culture of how they get things done, how they work, how they communicate within themselves. The police has a culture. Private security has a different culture, and the way that they work and things like that. So it's very important to distinguish these different cultures when you're working with them. And hopping on to culture again, just staying in the same topic, it's also the culture of where you are, the culture of the sport, and how you're being involved. So I've got a story on this one on how all these cultures kind of interlinked with each other in an event I was working in. I was working at a boxing event, and things got very heated between one of the teams and basically the refereeing. They really disagreed with the result of one of the bouts, and they got very aggressive. So you had this entire boxing team, big people, and they got very close to the fence, to the barrier that was between the stands and the field of play. And the security guys, and these guys with the private security, they got up close to the fence. So you have these two groups of people just getting closer and closer to the fence. And I just ran in there, and I got myself into the middle, and I started trying to calm things down. But the tricky thing here again with culture is, so the team was from a different country. I was in a country that was not my own, speaking a language that was not my own. And then the private security was from a different country. And so I'm trying to communicate this, I'm trying to use all the French I have, taking like all the French I have from the school days and everything else. And I'm trying to calm things down, but things are getting very, very heated, and I'm only one person. and the security guys are getting heated, and they're just getting closer and closer and closer together to the fence. And I know that as soon as both groups are by that fence, this is over. It's going to be an all-out brawl. But then one of the army guys was in there, and he was like higher ranked. I think he was a sergeant. He just gets in there, and he just yells in one command, and it was just very simple, very easy in the local language. It wasn't even French. It was in the local local language of where I was from. It was take a step back. So all the private security guys, they heard that, they understood it immediately. They the tone of it and everything, and they just took a step back. So then everything that's getting closer, this one group took a step back, and then I was able to get the team and get them to take a step back. And from there, we were able to cool things down. But again, it was very cultural. Like I was out of my depth culturally here, both in terms of working like the commanding of security. Because even though I had been given like security as one of my leads in this, I'm not a security person. I was just organizing it on paper in theory. But then this army guy came in and he like really commanded it. So that culture was very, very important in this. On one simple command, helping to calm things down. Take one step back. We're getting closer. One step back. Boom. One step back. And then the other group, we were able to get a step back. And then from then on, calm things down. So the knowing the culture of where you are, of where you're working, and who you're working with is extremely important in these security situations.
Yeah, I think that's a fascinating point, Gabe. I think, as you said, like understanding the culture of the different jurisdictions I remember even in your home country, Brazil, working on some of the big events here, we had so many different types of police, militar, civil, federal. Then we had the rodoviária, the highway police, all the different police, and then the military and all these other ones. And again, one thing I guess in terms of the sort of, as you mentioned, sort of the culturally as well, like these guys that, everyone's trying to do a good job, trying to help the event, but their only real kind of is to listen to their supervisors, listen to their command, they follow commands. And so I think that's really critical in terms of understanding the different cultures and being able to communicate with them and work with all these different jurisdictions. So yeah, I think that's a great example there. I'm glad I wasn't in the middle of that little scenario.
Can we jump into communications? Because there's one thing that links right into communications from this aspect of this whole cultural aspect of communication, mm-hmm. and the jurisdiction, everything, and knowing what's going on with the different groups. Mm-hmm. Security is an aspect that really needs to know what's going on with every other sector. And on the other hand, every other sector, every other different functional area, sports, transports, ceremonies, need to know what's going on with security. Obviously, not all the details, but we need to have some sense. One thing that happened with me, I was responsible for organizing the ceremony transport at an event. So mm-hmm. my focus was athletes on buses go to the venue. And that's all I knew. That's all I knew that I had to do. We organize the buses in the parking lot, get all the athletes in, get them where they need to go. All of a sudden, in the middle of all this chaos of buses and athletes and everything, like a special van comes in and just like butts itself into the bus and is telling the bus drivers, get out of the way. This is the bus, like this is a bus that, like, this is a special security bus that we have that we need to get it through. But there was no way to get it through because I've got hundreds of athletes walking through the buses to get in. So I'm not going to move any buses against safety of the athletes. But these security guys are no, like, you need to move it now. Like, I can't. For the safety of my athletes, I can't. I know you have a security operation, but you didn't tell us. And now you just need to wait. So the communication of all the planning is important. Like, I don't need to know who's in that van. It's not my business. What I need to know is that van is moving at what time, so it doesn't interfere with our other operations. So the communication within the operations is very important. Like for us, we could have compromised the security of the people in that van because of this operation, but not any fault of our own. It's just a lack of communication. So security knowing what's going on with all the other operations and letting us know what we need to know to make their operation smoother is very important. So the communication side of things is quite key.
Yeah, I totally agree, mate. I had the same sort of theory on this. So like my theory was, especially, and I learned the hard way, because like designing a complex operation, like you mentioned, the ceremonies transport or ceremonies logistics or any kind of big event where you got hundreds of buses and thousands of workforce and staff moving around and athletes, high profile people. Like in theory, like, we can all kind of sit behind we can design an amazing complex operations plan. And, and people can do that. I'll say anyone can do it, but, anyone can do it. But I think probably the biggest challenge, more than the actual design of the plan, is the communication of that plan. So that not only, like, it's easy enough for us to design it and understand it, and, we've got experience, whatever, but it needs to be understood by not only all these jurisdictions and different stakeholders, but then down to that person who is on that gate, that security guard on that gate, or that bus driver, or that person there, to understand their basic instructions. So I guess another technique which I've used for communication in events to sort of is obviously when you're working in an event and you've got these guys down at a security gate, often, you can go down and you can talk to them and stuff, but they, even though you use the example where you were actually the head of security in this event, but they're really just told to listen to their direct supervisor. So one of the techniques of communication that I would do sort of to reinforce some of the things was keeping, for example, like, simple access control boards. So in other words, like, okay, only people with this color can go through here, and actually sort of printing it out and putting it next to themselves. It's nice and easy to say, okay, just follow this here. It's a very simple thing. Or for example, prohibited items or something like that, like going into a venue or something, I'd like make sure that I just sort of reinforce the simple messaging and like paste it up in their little tent or in their little point to again sort of just to sort of like to reinforce the basic sort of messaging to try and get this complex plan down to a sort of simple level.
Yeah, that part of access control is actually very, very important. Like you said, it needs to be simplified. Sometimes the boards are so complex, and what we need the people that are responsible for that area. So in terms of access control, in the bigger events, and even in some of the small events, you have an accreditation, you have your card, you have the different colors and the zones, and it can be very complex. You can have a zone 2, which is added to a blue, which is added to the venue code, which is added to this, and it can be very confusing. And it's interesting to see, especially in the bigger events with athletes and team officials that are experienced with it, they will talk loops around the accreditation people and be like, no, I have this, but I have that, and added to this, it's okay, so I'll go through. And sometimes they can get looped into that confusion and let them through. And a lot of times, like you said, they have very strict instructions and they follow them. So actually, that's another thing I wanted to talk about in terms of communication is they need to have a flow of communication with their supervisors to sometimes work on some flexibility, because sometimes the access control isn't properly done and they need to find the flexibility. Mm-hmm. But in terms of security, the flexibility needs to be within certain parameters. You can't just be loose and flexible. I love flexibility in organizing events. I love adaptation, adjustment, not with security. Security needs to, worst comes to worst, you follow the instruction. And something happened to me in an event which really drove that to a point, in that we had the head of sports of the entire event, of the entire organization, goes into starts to go onto the field of play. Security guy there goes, nope, you're not coming in. So then like the head of operations goes, no, but this is the head of sports. He must go in. He has to go in. And he didn't even have access. It was because we had the access on the field of play, because we had, again, with the boards, too many people ended up having too many people had that zone. So I said, look, I created a little card, and I was like, only the people that have this added card onto their accreditation can go in. And neither the head of operations, neither the head of sports, I hadn't seen him that day, so I hadn't given it to them. And he was being barred. It's like, he can't come in, he can't come in, he can't come in. And I get this frantic phone call saying, Gabriel, come down here. This guy won't let us in. Just come in, fire this guy, and we need to get onto the field of play. And
poor guy, yeah.
And I was like, what's going on? And I said, look, these guys really should be going in. Sorry, I apologize. I haven't given them the cards yet. I gave them the added cards so they can get onto the field of play. Took him onto the field of play. I was never going to fire the security guy. He did the exact right thing that I wanted him to do. And the great thing was the head of sports, he looked at me and goes, I want that security guy at this door every day. That's exactly what I want to see. I don't want these people saying, do you know who I am, and all these things. He did exactly what was right. I wasn't supposed to be here. I didn't have the right pass. only when you gave me the right pass did he let me in. That's exactly correct. For our athletes and the officials, that guy in this door every day. And that's what we want. That's what we wanted.
No, that's a great. Yeah, the poor guy, but all he was doing his job, wasn't he? So you briefed him well, you communicated well. This is the challenge, is like getting these pressure from, everybody thinks that everyone's a special situation, and these guys have got a really tough job. So I love that. I love that story, because it shows, and thank goodness that the head of sport, understood that and took it well. Like that's a thing, and again goes back to maybe our sort of thing about culture as well. Like in certain places, understanding that culture and appreciating the sensitivities around different people who have expectations about being able to walk through anywhere as well, which makes it an even sort of tougher job. So I think that's a fantastic example, because again, it talks about sort of, communication through to that guy, making sure his instructions are simple, and then, backing him up. So, like he's not put under this pressure where he's forced into a situation where he's got to make a, complex sort of decision.
Yep. And that goes into one of our other topics, which is training. I mean, the training is quite essential, and in the training, like the training that we gave in this event, unfortunately, was very, very quick.
Yeah.
We just quickly spoke with them. It was a private security company, and we need to, like, all of a sudden in a couple of hours teach them how to work in events. So the training of it is quite important. But the main thing I said was, if you're not sure, don't let the guy in. And that's exactly what he did, which is what we wanted.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing that we were lacking in that training was the communication. How does he get a hold of me? Because we didn't have radios. Okay. So how do we get into that? How do we get that training? But one thing that made me very happy was the training that he had as a private security company, was that he stayed very calm. He just sat there. The people getting frantic were the other people. Like, the head of sports was just chilling, but like with some of the other staff were getting really frantic. And the two calmest people were the head of sports and the security guy. That were just that, no, you can't come in. And the head of sports was like, okay, someone figure out how to get in. I need to get in, but I'm not gonna go against this guy's job. So the training of it is quite important, to keep calm and how to respond. But that one, again, is a training that needs to come from whichever culture they are coming from. Either your private security company trains you, or the police or the army on how to deal in these situations. You need to have that training. But there's a key component, which is, how do you train for that specific venue? Because a marathon is very different to a basketball game, which is very different to a multi-day tournament, which is very different to all these different things. So you need to ensure that there's some training for that specific venue. Like, what is the moment that we intervene? What is the moment that we call someone to escalate? What is the moment, what are the different moments that we do different things in different events?
And I guess it's always really hard, especially with these workforces, because security guards tend to be quite a sort of transitory workforce, in terms of like you have quite a bit of attrition. They may kind of come, and you may have, and often with the events, as we know, like especially if it's a multi-day event, or even, like a major event that goes on for weeks, you have problems in those first couple of days, and then slowly, if you've got the same staff, they can start to develop, they get into a routine, and can start to sort of, and so your problems tend to settle down a bit. And again, that sort of happens as well. But again, you're always going to have those new people that may have missed out on the training. So again, perhaps it's an idea of, again, that sort of like having that sort of really basic instructions, really basic training, and reinforcing that with maybe, for example, your daily briefings or your daily debriefings, that sort of thing, and always sort of going around and checking on the guards, spotting anyone that's new, that's unsure, and talking to them and reassuring them, and kind of re-emphasizing the basic instructions that they had. But yeah, look, it's a real challenge, like getting, I said, and as you said as well, identifying, because there's varying levels of skills, and identifying, the ones that you can make supervised, the ones you can put in those very sensitive locations that need to have a little bit more capability to sort of handle those situations.
Yeah, I think one of the things as well is, like you said, it's very transitory sometimes. And sometimes, especially in some roles, become people that are just very temporary, like people from temp agencies even, especially on the scanners, on the scanner part of it. And I know you really enjoy scanners, so a lot of times you'll notice that there's people that don't have a security background. They're just there because they were able to get a job, because depending on the scale of the event, these security companies will just start hiring people for, okay, we need people for 5 days, and they're not trained, they're not in the culture or anything like that, especially in these roles where you're just kind of like, okay, all you need to do is scan, which seems simple, but sometimes can get complicated.
Although it's a very good point. And I guess I'm gonna click on technology as well, because I guess, like, especially since we both started getting into events, it's been an incredible, and when, not to sort of give away our ages, but when we first started, there was barely cell phones and mobile phones. And nowadays, there's so many different tools out there. There's the scanners, and obviously the regular, there's like tracking devices. There's incredible amount of apps that you can use. And I guess for me, it's like, that's very tempting, is to put all your faith in these. And now, if they work, that's fantastic. It makes life easier. But for example, when they don't work, this is when you've got to have your plan B. And I'm a couple of situations where we had a big event. We had a garage where we had hundreds of drivers coming into. These drivers were driving the buses that would take the athletes to the venues to compete. Now, it's obviously a critical part of the chain is the drivers getting into their garage. Now, the garage had a system of technology. I think it was a very basic sort of scanning system, had some magnetometers there. But of course, they didn't have power for whatever reason it was. The security guards, they weren't trained in terms of a basic backup, in terms of a plan B. Okay, if we lose power, if we lose the system, we've got to have the backup, whether it's pen and paper, whether it's pat downs, just basic common sense to get people moving. Now, in this case, it took a couple of hours before the problem had been identified and escalated up to the main operations center, and the instruction had to come down, but it took until that thing. So again, I think, look, everyone loves technology these days, but I think you've always got to plan for, okay, we've got to have a backup. And sometimes it's very much old school. It's like, it's a pen and paper, it's a printout, like hard copy printout of maybe access control, or people that are getting into a certain area, or daily run sheets. All that stuff is fantastic when you can use it on your iPad and use your special apps, but you've got to have the backup. And that goes for anything, like the scanning as well. Like, the scanning is only as good as the system behind it. So I guess that would be my messaging on technology. I love technology. I work in technology. I love it. But let's make sure we've got the backups for when things don't go right.
Yeah, and the other thing with technology, since we're in technology, I think what ties in well with it is the CCTV, and the use of it. Like, I mean, cameras are everywhere now, and in pretty much any venue you go in, there's cameras all over the place. There's cameras on the street. There's cameras, even if you're doing a small event. I guarantee the chances of there being cameras all over the place are quite big, and the use of this is actually quite important to see how you can centralize incidents and see where they're going. The thing is with security, there's this really fine balance of showing that you have security, but not over showing it, and not being exaggerated and things like that, because you want to have a safe event, you want to have a secure event, but at the same time, you don't want to like police all over the place. You don't want security all over the place. And CCTV is a good way to kind of try and minimize it, because you can have eyes everywhere, but it really needs to be well used, and people need to be well trained, especially with the communication, because if you're relying on CCTV, you need a communication of the person in the control center to say, look, we have an incident near like the back of house in this area. And so they can explain it, so someone can go in there and intervene. So even though CCTV is very good to have more eyes in the sky, if you will, the communication that comes from there needs to be really fast. So the people that are in that room need to be really focused and attentive to make sure that the people that are on the floor get to the right places at the right time.
No, I think that's a really good point on security cameras and the placement and obviously the visibility of them. But then not only that, but how are we going to react to them? It's okay being able to watch this thing take place, but how are we going to get out there on the ground and solve them? So I think that's a really good point. Look, we're coming towards the end. We've still got a lot of topics. That's fine. I never expected to get through all these today. But do we pick one last one? What would you like? I think. What do you think about dot planning, about workforce planning? It's always a pretty critical one.
Yeah, I think that one's a very key one, and it ties into the one we just talked about.
Yeah.
Because the way that CCTV is efficient is if the dot planning is well done. So dot planning is the way that we actually, usually old school, on a piece of paper, we put it on little dots on a map.
That's why it's called dot planning, isn't it? Like they used to actually get a different colored texter and do a little dot, and that was your person.
Yeah, exactly. So you have that little dot where people are. And the reason I think this ties into CCTV is we need to find the efficiencies. Okay, this person, which area can this person cover? And also in the dot plan, you need to put who that person is and what they do, and essentially what their jurisdiction is. Are they medical? Are they security? If they're security, which one of like the different types of security are they? And all those different areas. So the dot plan, the other important thing is not just a dot, is like, what is that dot? Who is that dot? And what are they covering? So there's a very important in the efficiency of your security and also safety, because like who are like the medical people, which I think are one of the biggest things in part of safety, is who's where and where can they cover. And then when you're communicating, especially on the CCTVs, we have an incident in the locker rooms. Who do we call? Like, who's the closest person for that incident to go there? And if you have a detailed dot plan, you can quickly look at it and go, okay, there's a security person here and there's a medical person here. I need both. Let me call them this one and that one, and whichever radio call they're on, and go in from there. So the dot planning, the workforce location is really important in both security and safety aspects.
Mm-hmm. No, I think you're right there. And certainly in terms of the workforce planning, in terms of the live operations, in terms of knowing where your resources are, and if we keep coming back to the communication with those guys on the ground, finding out who's there. Thanks so much, Gabe. Look, I've taken up enough of your time today. I will be sticking around and I can cover off any of these topics if we have some questions specific to them. But I'll give you a little hint. There's a lot of these stuff that's in our system, and so I'll be taking you through our audience through some further detail on some stuff like arrival modelling, evacuation assessments and barriers, and some of the other tools we've got built into OnePlan. But yeah, thank you so much for your chat today. As usual, I'm sure we could have chatted for hours. I know your time is very valuable. I'd love to get you on again for another webinar. And as I said, we could probably do a whole series. But thank you so much for your time. And it was really, really fascinating. And thanks for sharing your experience.
All right. Thank you very much. Always a pleasure.
Cheers, Gabe. Thank you so much.
Cheers.
Bye-bye. Yeah, sorry, that went for a little bit long. It's, as I said, we could have talked about that and any topic for quite a while there, but I guess there's sort of some key messages there, and I guess it's something you're probably going to hear from me in other webinars. Is I believe there's kind of three key words to always sort of consider with any kind of event planning. The first one's obviously communication. That's communication not only for with your plan, but on the ground and the live communication, the simplicity, because often we get caught up in producing a complicated plan, but at the end of the day, it's that simplicity that the person on the ground who's on that gate in that position needs to understand his or her role. And the third one, which I'm going to repeat again, is flexibility. And flexibility means in terms of contingency planning, knowing what to do in situation. So we lose power. What if we lose this? What if we lose that? Then just keeping that flexibility in the planning, and that's often something that gets people stuck a little bit. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to jump into our platform, and I'm going to show you some of the tools that we provide, which can help you with your safety and security planning. So again, fingers crossed this is going to work again. I'm going to jump into our platform. So let me just share my screen. I think that's what I need to do there. Share that one there. Share that one there. Okay, let's open up. Now, for those of you who haven't tried out OnePlan, give it a go. We've got a great freemium service now, so you can create one event free of charge, have a play, you get all the same objects, all the same tools. And it's a really good, and hopefully it's really intuitive. I do a lot of demos with OnePlan. And the advice I give at the start is, look, just create an account, get in there, start plotting objects. Once you've got the basics, you're going to pick it up pretty quickly. But at the same time, if you've got any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to me or any of the support staff. We love talking to the clients. I love talking to the users and answering questions. As a quick introduction to our planning platform, we've got different canvas options at the top here. These are different like backgrounds. You would have seen it before in other like Google Maps and etc. You got a choice. I usually prefer to plan in satellite view, but it's up to you. We've also, depending on where you are in the world, we've got certain high definition maps available. Now, in terms of objects that relate to security, okay, so the first thing we mentioned in the chat with Gabe was talking about different areas, different access controls, designating areas and accreditation areas, okay? So in our areas, routes and access, we've got a number of tools here. So I've just picked, I think we're in Hyde Park here. For example, you can allocate certain areas. There are different colors here. Let's allocate, so I click on it once. I click on the map once to start, once to change direction, once to change direction again, and to finish off, I just double click. And so there I've got my area. Now you might say, okay, well, that's very good. Over here, we've got our properties panel. So for example, I can look at, you can see that area there. I've plotted 6,000 square meters, and I can adjust the capacities depending on whether you've got social distancing requirements or just for crowd calculations. I can also do things like I can name this area. So let's, for example, maybe name this the VIP area. And I can also, for example, add a label to it. I might just actually call this the VIP label area. Now, again, with obviously security planning is considering really carefully about your accreditation areas. And then, for example, down here, we've got some client flow. So again, thinking about how your clients are going to move, or different clients are going to move through your events. So again, I could, for example, grab this route here. That's just another type of tool. I click on it once, I click on the map, I mark, I click to change direction, and I double click to finish. And again, with this one here, I can do the same thing. I can change the name of it, or I can add in some other sort of things like maybe some access points. And again, it's sort of stuff to help people identify where they get into their events and how they move around and their areas. So the first part of security is obviously good planning in terms of areas and in terms of route planning and paths through your event. The second section, which again specifically to security, and we've got lots of tools on here, is in infrastructure. So obviously what's critical in terms of security is often our barriers. So for example, we've got our Harris fencing or our perimeter fencing, which is usually used here. So again, I could grab this tool, going to go into my event, I'm going to click once to start the line, click again to change direction, click again, and double click to finish. And there I can tell that I have drawn a line of 132 meters, and it tells me how many segments I have. And then here is where each of the Harris fence segments is 2.5, but depending on where you are, potentially could be different. So I'm going to change it to 3, and you'll see the number of segments that are calculated will adjust. So that's fencing. We've also obviously got crowd control barriers, and we've got, which is obviously important for safety, is some traffic barriers, including jersey and concrete barriers, etc. There's also hostile vehicle mitigation barriers, which are very important these days, unfortunately, for stopping terrorists using a car as a weapon. So some good stuff in there under barriers. We've actually got a section also called safety and security. In here, we've got a number of different items which help to identify your plan. So for example, we've got here emergency exits. And again, with these ones, you just click on there and pop it on the map. And again, in the properties panel, you can see the details over here. We've also got, for example, security cameras. Again, you pop a security camera on the map here and we can mark out where all our CCTV is. So some really good tools there. The next one I was going to show you is dot planning. We mentioned it during the chat with Gabe. Dot planning is basically workforce planning, popping your staff on a map. And so, for example, here we've got a whole lot of different ones, but you can change the names. You can customize it to whatever way you want to do it. So for example, let's put in a few stewards. So I'm going to grab a steward and I'm going to pop him or her on the map here. And so this could be their base location. Now here again, I could change the name or I could add a label. Let's put this as JC myself, and I'm going to put a little label there. And I'm going to put it over my dot. And for example, here I might want to add some further details. So I'm going to add in some details of my shift times. So I might add in, so they're going to move my windows out of the way. So for example, that security steward is starting today at, let's say, midday, and let's give him or her an 8-hour shift. It's me, so let's give me a 6-hour, be nicer. So there we go. Now, all this information that you're putting into the properties panel will come out in your report section to the bill of quantities and other reports, depending on which object it is. So that's just a sample of dot planning. If I want to make a duplicate, for example, I can make a duplicate here by pressing on that button there, and you can see there I've got a duplicate of my steward, and again I can place them throughout my event. Or your dots or your workforce will come out in your dot planning or workforce planning report, which lists all your staff. Okay. Quickly, I was going to jump onto, okay, and again, I don't want to lose all of you guys. You had shown plenty of patience to stay with me so far. A couple of other ones which are really important for sort of more advanced event planning is arrival modeling, which is here in our main dashboard view. Really interesting. Basically, and I've done a couple of YouTube tutorials which give you sort of some instructions in detail. But long story short, you're adding in entrances or queues, and then working out how many people can be processed through each queue in a certain amount of time, in 15 minutes, and then also looking at, say, your arrival patterns from previous events. And so here we can put in some data, and then you can start to see, so depending on whether your event, say, might be, okay, everyone arrives at one time, or whether it's across the entire day, will depend on how your arrival model. So you put those numbers in here, and you can start to see with your queues how long people potentially have to wait, and therefore how much space might be required for those who are waiting in the queues. And obviously you're trying to bring those numbers down to avoid people having to wait to get into your event. So there's some really interesting stuff there with arrival modeling, and similarly with evacuation assessments, really important for any safety, any risk profiles, identifying your emergency exits. And how it's calculated is obviously the width of an emergency exit, and then depending on what sort of flow rates you can get from that. This depends a little bit on the demographic of your audience, of course, because depending, and also whether, say, the surface conditions as well, whether it's hilly or whether it's so how many people can move through. And so, I mean, as a rule, I usually use about 50 or 60 people per meter per width. And then obviously can change the width of my emergency exits here. So that's just a brief, but as I said, have a look on YouTube. So we've done some really cool professional tutorials on there, which give you some tools. And while I've got that open, why don't I reach out and see if there are any questions? Okay, bear with me. I'm going to try. to start mapping things out. Okay, I've got a question from, actually, maybe it's easy just to read them from here. Okay, so Darius Gibbons says, is there a time limit for access on the trial? For example, my event takes place in July, but I need to start mapping things out now. Would I have access for the whole time? The answer is yes. So as part of our, I suppose it's new, sort of came over Christmas, but it's a freemium package, free to plan one event. And so you can, it's only when you get to more advanced things that's when people want to plan multiple events that they can go onto our paid subscriptions. But the answer is yes, your freemium is there and you can plan up until July or however long it takes you. Was there any other questions? Let me see here. Oh, Q&A. Sorry, I've got the wrong one here. Oh, okay, great. Hi, James. Can you save your evacuation calculations? The answer is no, not as yet, but it's something we definitely are close to things. So right now it's just for modeling, but you're right, it should be saved to the event, and it's something that one thing, and I guess that's one thing that we really pride ourselves on in OnePlan is listening to our customers, and I think it's something that I really like about it as well. Is we love to be able to sort of satisfy things. So, for example, say you look at the placed objects and you go, oh, you know, a guy the other day that was planning, he was planning his yurts and his camping for Glastonbury and some big events in the UK. And he's like, oh, and he was using the circle button to simulate a yurt size. A yurt's like a Mongolian tent, sort of circular. And what was lovely was like I was able to kind of make him a customized yurt straight away. So the idea is we love having that feedback. We love knowing what you think the system's missing or things we could improve, because then we can actually really make it happen. And our engineers are really are fantastic in terms of they're really agile and they get things done really quickly. So in this case, I was able to have his yurts up in the same day and he's able to kind of keep planning with the same thing. But yeah, so save your exit evacuation calculations. Great point. No, it isn't right now. It's just temporary, but I think it should go into events, and it should also be able to list to do like multiple versions, because obviously depending on how your modeling is, sometimes you need to see the variation. So I think that's a really good question from anonymous attendee. Anonymous attendee number 2, same questions for entrance capacity calculators. Yeah, sorry, I've just answered that. Darius asks again, are maps to scale? Yes, everything's exactly to scale. So that's what's really nice about it. It's really simple. It's really simple. So anything you plot on the map, you can see. We've actually got a whole lot of new measuring tools right now as well, which is really cool. So you can pop a grid on the map, you can do rulers, and you can see everything in scale. So yeah, everything's to scale. So that's always nice. Anonymous attendee, is it possible to print out the maps or export to PDF? Yeah, so that's actually probably been our probably biggest request. And the answer is yes. We've got in our map view, we've actually got a screenshot tool. But on the way is a thing called presentation export, and presentation export is going to be really exciting. It's basically about being able to capture different views or different scenes of your event and create a PowerPoint. So the workaround right now, and what I do is I have PowerPoint or a presentation software open, and I just do screenshots and paste it into there. But the new one, which is in testing, so that means it's coming out very shortly, it's not far away, but it's presentation export is definitely our #1 request, and it's something we've been really focused on. Another question here, can you add a compass or a segment feature? Compass feature, I guess in terms of directions, always north in 2D for now. When we move into 3D, which again is another sort of medium term thing, is the ability to be able to move around your map. And so you'll be able to sort of change the orientation. And once we get to that stage, I think that obviously having the compass there would be critical, so you know where you are. Segment feature, I wasn't quite sure about that. So if you want to type that again, I'm happy to try and answer that one if you want. Any other questions? Okay, I've got my Q&A there, got my chat. Sorry, I'm not an expert at this, but I think we're getting better slowly anyway. Okay. All right. Well, okay. thanks for sticking with this, guys. I know it was a long session. We're trying to do a bit shorter, but obviously there's a massive topic. As I said before, please don't hesitate to reach out. I love chatting to users. I love getting the feedback. We've got a really good team here. We're really responsive. So please reach out, let us know what you like and maybe things that we can improve or any kind of special requests as well. As I said, we're really, we love to talk to event planners and understand what we call their pain point, understand how things are could be improved in the system. My email is just james.cook@oneplanevents.com and please don't hesitate to reach out. I'll probably be doing a few more webinars coming up. You'll probably hear some of the same stuff repeated, so I apologize about that. But anything you guys need, don't hesitate to reach out and we can jump on a call. It's the nature of work these days. We can just jump on a Zoom call. I promise hopefully I'll be a bit better than with my technology of Zoom next time we try that. But I'm happy to jump on a call and just chat about your specific case and whether we can help you in any particular way. Awesome. Thanks so much, guys. Have a lovely day or night or evening, depending on where you are. And we'll see you next time I think my next one is going to be on accessibility for events. And I've got a lovely expert special guest called Nick Morris, who was, I think, the captain of the Australian wheelchair basketball, and he now works as an International Olympic Committee advisor on accessibility for the event. So a really exciting topic and would be really good to chat to him, but also to look at the tools we've got in OnePlan. So thank you so much for your time today, guys, and have a lovely evening. Okay, bye-bye.